What's going on, YouTube? This is my very dirty Honda Civic Type R. It's probably dirty because it looked like this just a couple days ago. But anyway, I just crossed 1,000 miles on it, and there's a couple things I'm not really liking. So let's talk about it. But before we get started, don't get me wrong, I'm loving this car a ton after 1,000 miles. But just like any new car, you're always going to find things you don't like about it. You could really make this video about any new car you'd buy off the showroom today. So I just want to make sure you understand. Still liking the car a lot, but just want to talk about these few things. So let's do this list from least annoying to most annoying. Least annoying thing, but still a pretty big gripe, is the exhaust. Why is that? Well, kind of sounds like this. I just don't understand Honda building a car like this, designing it like this, pretty much like something that came out of Need for Speed Underground, and then making it sound like a Honda Fit. And I get it, it's a 4-cylinder, it's hard to make 4-cylinders sound good, but this has no sound at all, really. And if you look at something like the Veloster N, one of its competitors, that has a couple different exhaust modes. One of them is burbly and awesome, and the other one's kind of quiet. I don't understand why Honda couldn't do that with this car. And this is lowest on my list of gripes because this is an exhaust. You can fix that pretty easily. The only problem is, what I've looked at in the aftermarket, it seems like almost every exhaust at least adds some drone, which is frustrating. But anyway, I still think it's something Honda could have done better with this car. Now on to the second biggest gripe of this car, and I would say the drive modes, or maybe lack thereof customization of the drive modes. So for those of you that don't know, the Type R has 3 drive modes. It has a Comfort, a Sport, and a Plus R mode. And it's probably self-explanatory where the Comfort is the most comfortable, Sport's kind of that middle ground, and the Plus R is really that track mode, that extreme mode. So from what I can tell, there are a few things that change with the drive modes. First would probably be the throttle mapping, so that is how far you have to push forward the gas pedal to give throttle input to the engine. Second would be the weighting of the steering wheel, so how heavy or light it is. Third would be the suspension, so that is how soft or how stiff it gets. And then fourth would be the auto rev matching system, which you can turn on or off, but more on that later. Okay, so what's my gripe with it? Well, the lack of customization. Why do I say that? Because there are 3 modes, Comfort, Sport, Plus R. Each of them do their own thing. The Comfort mode has a super light steering wheel, which is good. It's a Comfort mode. Has a super soft suspension, good, Comfort mode. But the throttle mapping is so bad in that mode. You have to give it a ton of pedal input in order to even get going. And that really sucks for first gear as well. When you get into first gear, it feels like you're pushing the pedal halfway down to the floor just to kind of get into first gear smoothly. So that sucks for Comfort mode and makes me really not enjoy driving in that when I just want to cruise around. Sport mode itself is pretty good. The weighting is great. It's kind of a medium between extremely heavy steering weight and the soft or the really light steering weight in Comfort mode. The suspension setup is very good. It's compliant but sporty enough, and the throttle mapping is perfect. It feels like 1-to-1, like 2% into the gas pedal gives you 2% throttle input to tell the engine what to do. So that mode's really great, except when you just want that really cushy ride. Obviously you can't get that, but all around that mode's great. And then moving on to Plus R mode, that mode essentially, right, is like for track use. And again, throttle mapping is very sharp, very good in that mode. Suspension's very stiff, that's what it should be. But the weighting of the steering wheel is obscenely heavy, and it doesn't need to be. I mean, there's no reason why it needs to be that heavy. At some point, heavy steering is kind of relatable to sports cars. You know, luxury cars have very light steering, so I get it. They want to go heavy, but it's too heavy. It is too much effort to turn the steering wheel. And I feel like that's counterproductive on track. You want more steering feel on track, and usually that's more of a heavy steering wheel or more weighted steering wheel, but it is extremely heavy. Once I take this to autocross, it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm going to put it in the Plus R mode, but I think the weighting of the steering wheel is really going to get to me, and I'm going to kind of switch between Plus R and Sport and see what I like best. So you probably see where this is going. Where is the customization? That's my biggest gripe. If something like a Veloster N, which I've talked about already in this video, has an N button or an N mode where you can customize it to whatever you want. So you can take extremely soft suspension setup with extremely aggressive throttle input if you want. You can do whatever you want. And this car needs it so bad. So like for me, what I would do is I would make Comfort mode. I'd make my own Comfort mode, keep everything the same as it is in the normal Comfort mode, except make the throttle mapping a little better. So I would take the throttle mapping from Sport mode, put it into Comfort, so that way it's easier to get out of first gear and everything seems just more right in the way that it drives. And then again, if I made my own custom Type R mode, I would have everything stay the same, as I just mentioned, except I would take the weighting of the steering wheel from Sport mode and put that into the Plus R mode. And now this leads me perfectly into gripe number 3, which is the auto rev matching system. Now, I think if people are watching this video, looking at buying this car, I bet you at least half of them say, oh, I don't care about auto rev matching. I rev match myself, and that's fine. But I have a whole video on my channel you can check out. I'll link it above, where I did a comparison of my WRX, which did not have auto rev matching, and my 370Z, which does. Talked about the pros and cons of each, what I liked, and ultimately I came to love auto rev matching. It's just a lot more fun for me. It's a personal thing. It's extremely subjective. Some people will hate it, some people will love it, but I love it. So when I bought this car, I was extremely excited to have auto rev matching in this car, but it absolutely sucks. Like, absolutely sucks. So first 1,000 miles, I'm driving around in this car, I'm shifting around, and I swear it feels like the rev matching works half the time. So I'm like, why is that? Everything should rev match perfectly. So especially if I'm going from like in order, going down gears. So if I go from 6th to 5th, it seems like maybe half the time it rev matches. Going from 5th to 4th, maybe half the time. I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, am I just not noticing it, or am I thinking something's wrong? Why isn't it rev matching? So I do what any car nut does, and you go into the forums and start looking around. So I go in the forums, look around the rev matching, and there is a whole science to this rev matching and what Honda did. And I swear it has more if-then statements than like the Excel spreadsheets I use at work. It is incredible the amount of complexity they put into it to make it suck. This car is not really set up to rev match sequentially when you sequential downshift unless you're above a certain RPM. So what Honda says, or what I'm seeing at least in the forum, is that the gear you're currently in must be above 2,000 RPMs before you downshift into the next gear, which would be much greater than 2,000 RPMs, in order for any rev matching to happen. So you either, if you want to go sequentially, you need to already be above 2,000 RPMs, downshift, and then it will rev match for you, or you must skip a gear and go 2 gears down, or else it will not rev match at all. And that causes problems, as you might think, especially if you think about your daily driving on roads under 40 miles per hour. So this car doesn't bog until you get to like 1,500 RPMs or below when you're driving around. So when you're driving under 40 miles per hour, you can always find a gear that is above 1,500 RPMs, but under 2,000 RPMs. So what does that mean? You're driving around under 2,000 RPMs all the time, and someone in front of you is slowing down because they're going to make a right turn. So you downshift 1 gear, and what happens? No rev matching, even with auto rev matching turned on. This completely boggles my mind. Why wouldn't you just have, if you have rev matching on, every gear you go into, just match the RPMs with the engine speed, or the engine speed with your rolling speed. Match it every time so that every engagement is always smooth. If I don't like rev matching, I'll turn it off myself. But why do you turn it off sometimes and turn it on sometimes depending on how you're driving? That doesn't make any sense to me. So what does all this mean for real world driving? Well, it sucks and it is not smooth. And why is that? Well, because probably 1 out of every 2 downshifts I do, just in normal around town driving, doesn't rev match. If you are someone who has driven a car that has a rev match, you will know that you don't really look at RPMs as much anymore, because you know when you downshift, the RPMs are going to be at the perfect spot for you to let out the clutch into the next gear. So me, coming from my Z that does it perfect every time, I drive this around town, I'm not looking at my RPMs for all my downshifts because I know it should rev match perfectly. I let out the clutch, and 50% of the time when I let out the clutch, it's a huge jerk because the engine is not rev matched. So ultimately, to end this rant, this just boggles my mind, because if you have rev matching turned on, I obviously want to use it. So how about when I'm in a certain gear and the clutch is in, just get the RPMs ready for me releasing the clutch in that gear. Why does it have to do a bunch of if-then statements to determine if it wants to rev match or not? Just do it. And this ultimately brings me back to gripe number 2, which is the drive mode customization, because apparently in Plus R mode, the rev matching is perfect and it will always rev match 100% of the time. It has no weird if-then statements to figure out. It will just always work. So if I was able to do my customization modes, what I would do is I would make sure that that rev matching from the Plus R mode that works 100% of the time was in every single mode. But because it only works in Plus R mode, I will literally need to drive around in Plus R mode, the track mode, wherever I'm going if I want rev matching to work correctly all the time. So that's it. That is the 3 biggest gripes about my car. I have a couple honorable mentions, which I'll state right now. First, let's say, is the steering wheel. The steering wheel is Alcantara. I don't understand why they did that. So apparently in 2020, they switched to Alcantara steering wheels where they used to be leather. They should have just kept it at leather. Reason for that? I have a 370Z with an Alcantara steering wheel. It is great when you first get it. It's very fuzzy, it's very grippy, it's very nice. But in the 370Z, it's all matted down, has 30,000 miles. It's all matted down, and it is just gross and disgusting and not a good steering wheel anymore. And this steering wheel is going to do the same thing. And it's weird because they already had the leather steering wheel in the car before 2020, and they switched it to this. And just for reference, I have 1,000 miles on this car. I drive at 9 and 3 almost everywhere I go, or usually just at 9 if I'm shifting. And I never touch the top of the steering wheel like ever. I never drive like this. The left side of the steering wheel is already getting matted down a little bit. You can actually see it and you can feel it, where the top of the steering wheel is still fuzzy and very nice to the touch. So after only 1,000 miles, I'm already having problems where this is getting very matted down and already getting a little bit gross on the 9 o'clock grip, where at the noon grip, it's still fuzzy. So I'm not looking forward to that. Second honorable mention is the seats. They are fantastic seats. The only thing I have to say about them is where's the lumbar support? For some reason, I've owned a few sports cars, 3 of them to be exact, and all of them have some pretty decent seats when it comes to lateral grip and sporty grip, but all of them are pretty much straight up and down when it comes to the back. They never have lumbar, and I understand it might not have lumbar adjustment because it's a sports car, but at least have a little bit of a curve to give more lumbar support. I don't know why sport seats don't seem to do that. It's okay, it's manageable, but I feel like it just needs a little more support in the lower back. And the third honorable mention with this car, I would say, would be the wheels, the OEM wheels, the summer wheels, and tires. They're pretty good looking. I like them for the most part, but they're 20s. I feel like they should be 19s. It would suit the car better. And also the offset is very bizarre. The offset is not extreme at all. So the wheels really are tucked into the car, which doesn't make it look aggressive at all. It makes it look kind of wimpy, in my opinion. I feel like the offset should be more extreme. Push the wheels to the outer fenders and it would just look better. So I think that's just another thing. This, again, something you can change in the aftermarket, but an honorable mention. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm excited to get more miles on the car so I can do a full review and tell you all the good things about it. I just need more drive time, more seat time to really give a better overall review, but there are tons of things to like, not just these small dislikes that I have. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.